Hi, my name is Dion Rebello, and this is the Bullion Vault. Hi, Willem, how you doing?
Good and you, Dion.
Very good. So it is episode 25, and we got quite a interesting show today. We're going to discuss copper, as we'd mentioned in the last episode. But before that, let's just get into current affairs. I mean, current news. There's been a lot going on.
Definitely, the Middle East is a tinderbox at the moment. As we know, there's the US has ordered the bombing of Iran nuclear sites to stop them enriching uranium, or is it plutonium? What?
Nuclear technology.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically to stop them from building a nuclear weapon is what they're saying, and yeah, that has dramatically increased tensions in the Middle East to the point where Iran was threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz, and as we know, that could have some dire consequences. I mean, 30% of the world's oil ships through that strait. It's something like 20 million barrels a day going through the Strait of Hormuz. And if Iran closes it, I mean, I think it was Goldman Sachs that predicted we could see oil going to $110 a barrel.
That's yeah, again, and what's interesting from that is, of course, the B-2 bombers did an overnight drop on the 21st of June. And as Trump said in the news I was listening to earlier, which he's very clear on which news is fake news, like CNN and all of those. But again, besides that, he says it was completely and utterly obliterated. In other words, they were asked, can they actually start to rebuild those facilities? And he said from the sources he had, which were on the ground, that it would take decades to rebuild those facilities to do enriching of nuclear technology.
And it's quite interesting because Iran says, "Ah, they set us back a couple of months," you know.
Yeah.
But I think the more important thing is they've brokered a ceasefire. Now let's be clear, it's a ceasefire, not a truce, and that of course has stabilized things a little bit. It has calmed down the markets as well. Oil is down a little bit, as is all of your safe haven metals, your gold, your silver. It's down a little bit, but you know, as you said earlier when we were just chatting, it might also be down to just some profit taking. Um, so yeah, there is a ceasefire at the moment. It seems to be quite fragile, as already they've been lobbing missiles at each other since then. But it seems to be holding for now, and I guess we'll just have to watch and keep an eye on that for the moment.
So what's interesting is I saw an interview with Trump yesterday, and he was very annoyed. In fact, he was about to get onto Air Force One. You know, he's got the helicopter that lands at the White House on the lawn there.
Marine One, yes.
Yes, Marine One. And he actually swore on international news. He basically shat out the Iranians and the Israelis and said, I thought we had a deal here. You guys are effing it up. And
Yeah.
he literally didn't even blink, turned around and walked to Marine One and subsequently got onto Air Force One. And within an hour of that happening, all the airspace, and I've got a couple of people that I know within that region. And I mean, the UAE's airspace was shut down, Dubai's airspace was shut down, Qatar's airspace was shut down. Suddenly it all came back on board within the space of hours of Trump doing that call. So again, I mean, I've always had my thoughts about the man, but clearly he walks his talk and talks his walk. And the important thing is he's holding them to a ceasefire. Let's see what comes of that. But again, this is more about precious metals. What's interesting is we see where it was last week. There has been a bit of a pullback on silver. We're seeing it around $35 an ounce. Last week when we had our last episode, it was around 37. So there's a little bit of a pullback, but it's still solidly in the mid 30s.
Yeah, it's I think it's close to 36 at the moment, just under 36, 35, 80 or something
Yeah.
like that. And yeah, as we've said before, it's actually holding that ground. Usually you see silver go up, hit a peak, and then drop quite significantly, and then it sort of hovers there for a round, and then it repeats itself. But this time around, silver seems to be actually it's done the climb. It's sitting there. Yes, it's spiking and pulling back, etc., etc. But overall, it just seems to be holding right there, around about at what is it, $36 an ounce at the moment.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I mean, we look at gold, and it's pretty much where it was last week. It's a little bit down slightly in dollar terms. So again, I was actually just listening to an interview earlier, and it's the guy from that heads up the CPM, which is the company that owns the COMEX in the States, which is the one of the biggest bullion exchanges in the world. And a lot of the pricing that we get is either through the COMEX or through the LBMA, which is the London Bullion Market Association. And what he was saying is it's definitely an indicator that it's more of a profit taking than that it's based on the ceasefire. He also took it further to say that the fundamentals behind where the dollar is, the US economy is, inflation, and so on, is probably holding it where it is. And subsequently, we didn't have such a major pullback.
Definitely. And I mean, it's also, we're still waiting for the Fed to decide whether they're going to cut rates. And that also, people are just hedging their bets against that. So there's a lot of wait and see happening at the moment. But yeah, gold remains in $3,300 an ounce and above. We haven't seen it dip below that for quite a while now. In
Yeah.
fact, we've seen it spike above 3,400 once again. So it's really doing well. And once again, I mean, platinum.
Yeah, again, we know that I think it was 2023 was the real strong year for platinum. It was the top performer, and it's definitely really come to the party this year.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it at $1,310 an ounce at the moment,
Yeah.
which is quite a significant climb this year alone. Um, yeah, as you mentioned, 2 years ago it was the absolute star of the show. Last year it was very lateral, and then this year it's taking another step forward.
Yeah, and again, I mean, it speaks to this growth within in the commodities market where there's a definite need, and again, a lot of this is it driven by the industrial uses or is it actually driven by the investment uses? And again, it is kind of split, and that was also very clear from that interview I was listening to.
Definitely. And speaking of industrial uses, we said we're going to take a look at copper this
Yes.
episode, because we've had a lot of people who come to us and asks, "Oh, I see copper is doing really well. Do you guys sell copper?" And the answer is yes, we do. But
And a big but there because we got to actually contextualize this and Willem, we're going to break it down to that is we really looked at this and we thought, we want to always make sure that we're offering our clients the best possible access to various metals. I mean, we looked at palladium, we looked at a number of other metals and so on, but we found that based on certain things, palladium was just too volatile, and also the resale of palladium wasn't great. So it made no sense to be promoting it where people buy it at a certain price, and then when they want to sell it, they're getting it massively discounted because it's a buyer's market.
definitely, and let's jump into copper. Let's start with why, or what are the properties of copper. And properties wise, it has some similarities to silver. Firstly, it's an excellent conductor of electricity
Yeah.
because it's got 29 electrons, and that allows for the free flow of a negative charge or something like that. I'm not a physicist, so I can't really tell you, but silver has 47 electrons, and therefore it is the superior conductor of electricity. But there are also drawbacks to silver, which is the first one: it tarnishes easily when it's in contact with the elements, while copper does not tarnish as easily. And thirdly, another property of copper: it's an excellent conductor of heat. So that is why we can use it. It's also very malleable, and that's why we can stretch it into long, thin wires. The wires conduct electricity very well, and it also conducts heat very well, which means there isn't a buildup of heat that causes a failure anyway. And that's why we have copper pretty much everywhere in the walls of our house. We use it as one of the main conductors of electricity.
Absolutely.
Another thing, it's also used in water pipes because of its anti-corrosive properties. It doesn't corrode as badly as silver does when it comes into contact with the elements. I mean, we've all seen that beautiful green green oxidization layer that it gets
Yes.
when it does corrode, but it doesn't fall apart. And that's one of the main reasons why it is used more extensively in everyday electronics than silver. I mean, when you get to specialized electronics, then silver is the absolute champion because it is such a good conductor. But the contacts, it needs to be kept dry, it needs to be kept away from all the elements to keep that silver from corroding. And that, of course, is also where gold comes in. They also use gold contacts because gold doesn't corrode at all.
Yes.
So that is basically the difference between the three. Copper is your more everyday use. Silver is a little bit more specialized, and your gold is your really high end sort of contacts on electronic equipment.
And again, it also comes down to the pricing. If we look at silver, gold, and copper in an per ounce, and I'll quote it in dollars, you're looking at gold at around $3,300 an ounce. You're looking at silver around $35 an ounce, and you're looking at copper around 30 cents an ounce.
Yes, we were talking
US
earlier.
cents.
Yeah, we were talking earlier. It's $5 a pound for copper. And that brings us to the issue of why we said yes, but. Now, let's start off with why these metals cost what they do. If we look at mining costs, we're looking at copper, which costs about, depending on where you look, which mine you're looking at, $1 to $2 a pound to mine. Then we're looking at silver, which is roughly about $26 an ounce to mine. So once again, pound ounce. We need to remember that very
Yeah.
carefully because a pound is what, 500 grams roughly,
Correct.
and an ounce is of course 31.2 or 31.10, etc., etc.
Yes.
grams an ounce. So that just gives you an indication of the actual price difference in mining these. Also, silver is less rarely actually mined consciously. It's oftentimes a byproduct of copper refining, of or copper mining, of gold mining, and other metals and the like. And then we get to gold, which costs about $1,700 to $2,300 an ounce to mine.
Yeah.
And that just gives us an indication of why these things cost what they do, firstly. Secondly, the scarcity. I mean, copper is abundant, silver less so, gold even less so.
And again, and I know this is my experience coming into this, is majority of the gold that there is a lot of open cast mining for gold, but a lot of the big reserves that they're finding are quite deep. So it's a lot of deep level mining, vertical shaft mining. You like even in South Africa, we mining gold at over 4 kilometers under the ground. Whereas as you mentioned, silver is a byproduct of a lot of processes. It's definitely part of the byproducts of platinum and of gold. And so it's also uranium. We're talking about nuclear and that type of technology. I mean, it's very much connected to gold, silver, and uranium within the Witwatersrand reefs. But what's interesting with copper is, as you mentioned, there's a mass amount of it available. It's shallow mining. I've been up to the copper belt in Zambia, and you cannot get over the vastness of those fields where they're mining it and the continuous movement of semi-produced copper that runs from Zambia down the N3 through South Africa to the port of Durban, and then on a boat, semi-refined to China, gets fully refined, and of course we as Africans buy it back in the end product.
Yes, we do a lot of that. If we could just harness and actually manufacture those products, I think it would be absolutely fantastic for the continent as a whole. But let's not get into that now.
No, that's why I left it there because it's a bugbear of mine. I'm a big believer in manufacturing, and for me, it's sinful to find a lack of a better word. But yes, I have diverted my little plug in there. Sorry about that, but let's get back to it.
Okay, so yes, I mean, as you were saying, copper, they've got the massive open pit cast mines, or the open cast mines where you'd see this mine with all the trucks going down. As you said, gold, yes, they dig down kilometers to go and mine it. And it's an interesting article or interesting thing that scientists are talking about nowadays is that there's actually gold leaching from the core of the earth
Yes.
into the crust, and it makes sense now why we have to dig so deep to go and get it. So yeah, that was actually an interesting. I've actually seen a few articles on it, and apparently there's like tons and tons of gold in the Earth's core.
Yeah, and what's interesting, but just a bit of a history here, is a slight diversion again, is but where a lot of the actual belt of gold that we have that runs from literally the western side of Johannesburg all the way out on the west towards Welkom, which is into the Free State, which is another province within South Africa, is that area was actually a giant inland lake, and we're talking billions of years ago. And what's interesting is when you're actually mining, you actually see the seams of gold and it's black because the gold is attached to carbon. And hence it has a black appearance. Of course, there's a lot of processing. They leach off the carbon and then they actually have the gold itself. But what's interesting is if you actually see the gold in its finest form, there are millions of little pebbles that it's all around, and you get the black specks of gold along that seam. And that is evidence that billions of years ago, this was an inland sea, and all this gold was rushing down, settling to the bottom of the sea, and then, of course, creating these rocks. And again, we can't even understand how the earth has changed over these periods of time. But yes, it's a part of it coming from the top, and then also, as you say, this now leaching out from the bottom because the core is gold rich.
And I mean, it's just really fascinating to me to look at the origins of these things. Like, if you think about it, golds were formed in supernova,
Yes.
so it was a star exploding and it formed this material, and that somehow collected as a little ball of dust and then settled into the earth and leached from it's just, I love it.
Yeah, listen, we're going into another whole thing. I mean, I love cosmology and how things were formed, and how the elements were all forged and all of that. But again, I think let's get back onto the copper wagon. Again, the big problem from an investor, and this is ultimately why we bring in copper, because we wanting to really also focus on the podcast where we start to people ask us the questions, we need to answer them. In order to start to look at copper as an investment, explain to me, like, just so we can break it down, why is it not worthwhile to be buying ounces or kilograms of gold or copper?
So here's the thing, we've spoken about the price to mine these materials. Now that's step one. Then it needs to be refined. It needs to eventually end up at a manufacturer who mints these into medallions or bars or whatever you might have. And the problem is that comes at a cost, obviously. Now, if you look at something like silver, for instance, an ounce of silver, it's going to cost you roughly at the moment, I think, 900 to 1,000 rand for an ounce of silver.
And
And
that's an actual coin,
that's an actual coin.
manufactured, pressed, everything.
That's a coin in your hand. You give me 1,000 rands, I give you an ounce of silver. That's the way it works. You look at gold, we're looking, geez, I don't even know at the moment, 70,000 rands
Yeah,
for an
yeah.
ounce of gold. And then you look at copper, and a copper, let's say copper bar. I've got here the cost. I think it is a 1 kilogram copper bar, which costs 650 rands. Now I've looked, it's the same thing. It's 650 rands. A pound copper bar. I looked overseas, some of the overseas sites as well, and a copper bar would cost you $25. Now here's the thing: the value of that copper bar, the value of that $25 copper bar, is $5. That means there's $20 worth of manufacturing that's gone into it. And if you look at something like silver and you say, okay, there's $20 worth of manufacturing that's gone into this, it's a much smaller fraction of what you would have for copper. If you look at gold, it becomes an even smaller fraction. So that's the biggest problem, is the manufacturing on copper versus silver versus gold. Yes, the more precious metals are a little bit more expensive to manufacture because, but eventually it's copper and silver, it's about roughly the same to produce an ounce of copper and an ounce of silver. So the manufacturing cost is so high on the product that you finally have in your hand that it makes it absolutely prohibitable. If you bought copper today and you paid your 650 rands for your bar of copper, I don't know if you're ever going to make your money back within the next 50 years. I looked at the history going back 10 years, the history of the price of copper. and it's gone from $2 to $5 a pound. Now that is what, 150% increase in 10 years.
Yeah.
But if you're paying 200, 300% for manufacturing on that, you're still not even halfway to breaking even.
And I think I don't think, I know you're raising a very valid part of this argument, is it's a return on investment. At the end of the day, someone wants to see the benefits of buying into gold, buying into silver, buying into precious metals. The fact that they hedged out of fiat currencies and they stand alone. I mean, we've spoken about the benefits of gold with regards to Basel III and all of that. So it's becoming more noted within the international and especially within the financial markets as a real serious player, especially gold. Silver has had great performance, but again, it's a return on investment. If I'm spending 800 Rand on a coin, I'd like to know within a specified period of time, it needs to firstly cover the cost of manufacturing, which is that premium you pay above spots, and then I can start to benefit from the actual growth of the product. Now, what you're essentially saying is to do that with copper, you're going to wait a very long time. If not, it's going to have to jump in levels that we have not seen over the last 10 or probably 20 or 30 years.
Yes, and that's the other thing is, we always say silver is an industrial metal, platinum is an industrial metal, but copper is a true
Purely industrial.
industrial
Yeah.
metal. That's it. And so it is very closely tied to supply and demand, to manufacturing, to the economy, really. And, yes, it makes it a little less volatile, but still, as I'm saying, 10 years, it's grown 150% from $2 to $5, yet that premium that you paid is still nowhere near to getting covered. And that brings us on to the second problem. Right, I've got copper. Now what? Who's going to buy it?
Exactly, and that's, as I mentioned earlier, for me is when we looked at palladium, that was the same thing. Is people wanted palladium, but that's fine. It comes to the buyback, and any reputable person based in this industry needs to be able to offer their client that return. That if they do hit rough waters that are where they're battling financially or their cash flow is short, and they need to liquidate some of their investment, they're able to, but they're not also losing massive amounts of it. Or we turn around and say, sorry, we don't have any buyers for it.
Yes, I mean, gold, you walk into any shopping mall, there's a kiosk where you can go sell your gold.
Divorce your gold. Yes.
um, silver, I mean, you can go to any sort of coin shop, any bullion dealer, and they will probably give you a fair price for your silver. Copper, you probably have to go to the scrapyard, to the scrap dealer, and you're going to get cents on your rand for that.
Yeah. And again, so when we look at this, is if we ever had to, and the whole idea with this is it's information, is to truly benefit from copper, you'd need to be buying it in not the ounces, kilograms. We're talking 500 to a ton of copper, holding it, its space. It's a whole number of things that then become a problem. And then once you've realized your growth in it, you then need to sell it. So there's a whole thing, a number of things. So again, there's a lot of people promoting copper. We say with a big asterisk, pay attention and do your research first on the return of that investment.
Definitely. And as we said, the biggest issue is the actual premium that you're paying on it. I mean, let's be honest here, we put a premium on it. We do our markup on the finished product as well. We're not in this for our health.
Yeah.
Although we love it, we need to make a profit. But so you mentioned the storage, and I'm glad you brought that up because I did a little bit of sums here, and because I thought, right, I've got R1,000,000. What can I buy? So I thought, okay, let's look at gold.
Okay, so this is a great exercise. So just put the numbers down. It's R1,000,000 you got in hand, and now you want to see how you can actually make that money grow for you.
Well, not so much make it grow as what am I going to do with this once I've bought it? Because you mentioned the storage issue.
Yes.
So R1,000,000, I want to buy gold. What do I get? Less than 500 grams. Now that is That is like half the size of the cell phone.
Yes, to be exact, it would be literally that of a cell phone.
So that's your 500 grams of gold. You go somewhere, you chuck it in a safe, done. So next up, I want to buy silver. Now I've got R1,000,000 in my pocket. I buy silver, and that translates to 40 kilograms of silver.
Which is significant.
I did some sums on that too. It would come to 15 by 15 by 20 centimeters is the volume that 40 kilograms of silver would take up. Now that is, okay, you need a little bit of a bigger safety deposit box, but still not an issue.
That's in context, because we also have got vaulting facilities that we use with Fidelity, which is an independent service provider, is one of our vault boxes. We've actually pegged them to hold 40 kilos, and that is 100% to the dimensions you've just mentioned.
And then, of course, we get to copper. Now, you care to venture a guess how much copper R1,000,000 would buy? Now, bear in mind, I did take this as the $25 an ounce that they are selling it at one of the international shops.
$25 an ounce, right? So we're looking at what about?
No, you're not allowed to do maths.
Ah,
Okay, so anyway.
okay, so give it to me. Okay, I'm going to do a stab in the wind, just off the top of my head. I would say it's probably about 1.5 tons.
You're way too good at this.
Am I?
1,538 kilograms worth of copper that you
How
buy
good is
for
that?
$1,000,000. 1,538. You'd need 3 half-ton buckies just to move your copper around. That's 3
Same
Nissan
value.
NP200s
Yeah.
in convoy just to move your copper from one spot to the other. And I think you can see the problem there. That would come to 0.5 square meter block.
Again, that's also your vaulting costs, because generally that is quoted in square cubic meters. Of course, it's fractionalized down on the smaller amounts, but there you're going to start to take up space, which is going to cost you on an annual basis. And again, on that kind of size, on the value of what you're holding, it doesn't make sense.
And then we're back to the story of how long do you have to keep it there before you actually make your money back to start with, and how long before you actually make a profit. And I can tell you, if we look at $2 to $5 over the past 10 years, yes, I know that's 150% increase, but I don't think it's going to be a linear progression.
Yeah.
I might be wrong, but to me, it just, I think you're not going to live to see your copper pay dividends on a smaller scale. If you're dealing in tons and tons and tons, I'm talking 10, 15, 20 tons of it, then yeah, sure, you're probably going to be able to make a profit on it because your relative cost for manufacturing and everything will be lower. But if you're an investor like you and I, who's buying an ounce of silver, an ounce of gold, whatever the case might be, buying an ounce of copper, buying a kilogram of copper, in my mind, simply isn't worth it because of the premium that you're paying on top of the base metal.
And just to put context to what Willem is saying, is we as a company looked at it, and initially we looked at ounce coins and we thought that makes no sense. It absolutely made no sense that the manufacturing exceeded the actual cost of the metal, hands down. And then we said, okay, well, then let's look at a kilogram bar. And a kilogram of copper is roughly the size of a good cell phone. There you're looking at, again, the costs were just too high. And we even did a little bit more research. We even sent it out to clients to see if there's interest. But we couldn't actually reconcile with ourselves that we could be selling something knowing that in the long run it's actually going to not give you the value and the return of investment that we believe our clients deserve.
Definitely. And I mean, and obviously they also did their homework because we presented them with this opportunity. They looked at it and they said, but why is it so expensive? That's what we get it for, we're making a very thin margin on this. This is what we get it for. This is the best price we can offer it, and they will pass, So that is the problem. It's the manufacturing costs, the premium that we have to put on top of it for, the services that we offer. And eventually it just becomes too expensive to buy copper as an investment in small scale.
Yeah, and I think that's the really underlying thing here is to invest or not to invest in copper. Again, of course, go ahead. If you feel strongly and you believe that there's something that we don't know, and we not to say we are not financial planners or certified. We whatever we say here is purely for information. And please do your research on everything we're saying. Again, we do a lot of research into these things, and it doesn't make sense to us. And for us, we got to, and I've always said this, is whatever we produce, we got to believe and know that we're adding value to our clients.
Definitely. And I mean, as you said, there's a lot we don't know. But yeah, so basically that's what it comes down to. I mean, if we just look at prices in general, obviously gold, silver, platinum doing extremely well. Copper, yes, it is actually doing well, but it's just that manufacturing cost, that premium, that just makes it prohibitively expensive on that end for what you actually get when you're going to sell it.
Yeah, and again, I think this is that commodity boom that I've spoken about. But there you would have a lot of industrial buyers would be buying per in the tons. They get a discount on the tonnage that they're buying anyway. So again, that's where they realize the actual benefit of it, and then they can also, once they start to use that copper, as you said, to make products from it, those products have a far better markup. So they're able to take the raw material and then actually produce products where that's where the gain is for them.
And a lot of those manufacturers won't be interested in your 1 kilogram bar,
No,
unfortunately.
no. As you said, I think right now, and I'll actually look into it, but you're right. You're probably your metal scrap dealers that are based in industrial areas. They would probably be the only people interested in it. And as you mentioned, like with a lot of unscrupulous people buying gold, like your pawn shops and things like that, where they will offer you on gold spot less 20 to 30 to, I've even heard of guys offering spot less 70% of value on gold because they know that the people going to those shops firstly are desperate for cash. And again, those are the kind of people where a scrap dealer is there to produce volume, and they're not going to give you the best rate on that. They're going to give you the bare minimum that they actually can get out of it.
Yeah, well, one good thing I think that has come out of all of these bio gold pop-up shops everywhere is that people don't actually have to go to a pawn shop to sell their gold anymore. And, you know, pawn shops have been sort of forced to sort of come to the party on that one. They, if you walk to a pawn shop and they say, I'll give you spot minus 50, but you can just go to your local mall and they'll give you spot minus 10 or 15 or whatever. I
Yeah.
must actually go and ask one of them what they
It's
offer.
about I've actually done this, and generally you look at about spot less 20 to 30. If you do know and I know a lot of the guys that work in the buyback sector, and there you can get guys that will buy at spot less too, but they are very specialized. They have a niche, and that's what they focus on, and they're not commonly known. So those are the people, of course, when we need buyers for our clients, we go to those people. We say, this is what we have. Are you prepared to buy? And that's why we try and make sure we get the best possible price for our clients.
Definitely. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're really desperate, yeah, you can go and you can get a more fair price than you could a few years ago. So I think that has really sort of just made things a little bit better for people wanting to sell their gold. It's not a case of I need to sell this immediately. I need this money desperately. You're not going to get ripped off to the tune of 70% anymore. So
Yeah.
that is very good. Copper, on the other hand, I don't know.
So I think the base of this, and again, this is all part of the educational side of what we're bringing here, is bringing these things, and we really enjoy the comments that are made, and we do go out of our way to try respond to them. Sometimes I do make a point to respond myself. I know Willem, you've been busy also with it. And please, you know, if you're liking what we generating, please share it to other people. So when you see someone trying to sell you copper or a copper bar, or a kilo bar, or copper coins, and this is a great investment, again, it's smokes and mirrors. And I see this where it's a beautiful set of copper ounces, and it's this, and then they're charging literally what you'd buy silver for.
That is unfortunately the problem. There's a lot of people who offer these things, and I mean, we even see it in Kruger Rands, you know,
Yeah.
which is legitimate gold and silver products. But they're offering this because, oh, it's a special year, or oh, it's a set of this. And
Or they are proof sets,
yeah,
and they're shiny, super shiny, and people say, yeah, but I told you, I'm sure I've said the story before, where I met that one client in George, and he was so proud to show me his half ounce Krugerrands, gold half ounces, and they were proof sets, and he was so proud of them. So I said to him, at that stage, I said to him, how much did you pay for that? And this is where gold at the stage, an ounce of gold was around, I think it was about 55,000 Rand an ounce. So, you know, we can see where it's gone to. And that's probably about 4 years ago. And at that stage, he had bought those proof half ounce Krugerrands for around 50,000 Rand. And I literally had to stop while I was driving, and I could not believe that he actually, and I said, do you understand? You could have bought a full ounce of gold for that same price. But he says, but it's a proof set. I said, again, this is part of the industry that I get very frustrated with, because ultimately people, unless like you do, a Krugerrand has a date and I want to get one for a child because it's the year they were born, or it's their 21st, or whatever. There's a sentimental value which I'm prepared to pay that premium. Or as you've said, like where you see an awesome coin and it's a Star Wars coin, or something that has a value to you that you can associate to it. And you're prepared to pay that premium because of whatever the novelty with it. Be it a proof coin, or be it a gold coin that's been sitting in a drawer for a year, 10 years, and all scratchy, and that the same values attributed to it when you actually realize its actual real values.
definitely. And the thing that, I mean, when was this? Many moons ago, I was in real estate, and you'd walk into a house, and the owner would tell you, "Oh, I want 5 million for this house," and you look at him, you go, "But it's worth half that." "Yes, but my children grew up here." The next buyer doesn't care.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with coins. The next buyer doesn't care that's your special proof set. He cares that there's an ounce of gold.
Yeah. In closing, Willem, any other final thoughts?
If you like the content, subscribe. And if you thought this was a good show, give it a like. And we'll see you guys in the next video.
Take care. Thank you. Bye.